Welcome to Saints and Stillness, a quiet series following the men and women of the Church of England's liturgical calendar. Tonight we come to Alcuin of York, whose feast day falls on the 20th of May. He lived in the 8th century and became one of the most learned men of his age, scholar, teacher, reformer, and the guiding mind behind what historians call the Carolingian Renaissance. Before we come to his story, let us simply sit with who he was. Alcuin was born around the year 735 near York in the north of England. He was educated at the cathedral school in York under the great Archbishop Aelbert, and it shaped everything about him, the depth of his learning, the breadth of his reading, and his love of teaching. He rose to lead the school himself around 778, and under his care it became one of the finest centres of learning in all of northern Europe. Then in 781 he met the Frankish king Charlemagne at Palma, and his world changed entirely. Charlemagne invited him to lead his palace school at Aachen, and Alcuin accepted. The school at York that Alcuin inherited was built upon a library gathered over generations, and it was, by the standards of the time, the finest library in northern Europe. It held texts from across the Christian tradition, scripture, the great fathers, grammar and rhetoric, astronomy, poetry. Alcuin taught everything the library contained: grammar and rhetoric, the movements of the stars, the careful reading of Scripture. Students came from across England and from the wider Christian world, drawn by the quality of the teaching. It was, for its time, something truly remarkable. At Aachen, Alcuin led the palace school for 14 years, from 782 to 796. He gathered scholars from across Europe and set to work on some of the most important tasks of his age. He standardized the text of the Latin Bible, the Vulgate, correcting centuries of accumulated errors. He reformed the liturgy across the Frankish Empire, bringing coherence to how Christian worship was celebrated. And he taught. Nobles and clergy sat in his school together, and among his students were members of the emperor's own family. There is one remark of Alcuin's that has been quoted ever since. Do not listen to those who say the voice of the people is the voice of God. After Aachen, Alcuin turned to another great work. Through the scriptorium at Tours, which he founded and led as abbot from 796, he introduced a new form of handwriting that we will now call Caroline minuscule. It was clear, elegant, and easy to read, and it spread across Europe, becoming the ancestor of the typefaces we still use today. He also wrote against the adoptionist heresy, a controversy that threatened the unity of the Western Church. And through it all he continued to write. More than 300 letters survive, along with poems, theological works, and educational textbooks that shaped learning for generations. Alcuin returned to England briefly before settling at Tours as the abbot in 796. He made the abbey a centre of learning, and at the heart of it was the Tours Scriptorium, a workshop that produced manuscripts of extraordinary quality, copied and sent out across Europe, studied and treasured for centuries. The scriptorium alone would have been enough to secure his legacy. He died on the 19th of May in the year 804, and his feast falls on the 20th, the day after his death. He was buried at Tours, in the church he had served for so many years. There is another saying that lives close to the heart of everything Alcuin did. He wrote in one of his letters that it's better to leave this world having loved wisdom than to have possessed all the wealth of kings without having sought it. It is quite a quiet statement, but it captures something essential about the man, the sense that learning was not a means to power, but a form of love and a form of faithfulness. In the common worship calendar, Alcuin is commemorated on the 20th of May, the day after his death, as deacon, abbot of Tours and scholar. His feast falls on the 20th of May, and it is an optional commemoration, a quiet observance fitting for a man who sought no recognition. He is one of the most learned men of the early medieval world, and the Church sets his name before us not because he was powerful, but because he gave everything he had to the love of truth and the service of others. Alcuin left a remark in a letter to Charlemagne that has been remembered across the centuries too. Learning is like a candle. It gives light to all who are near, and it loses nothing of itself by being shared. What might Alcuin offer to those of us seeking to live faithfully today? Perhaps this, that learning is a form of love. He devoted his life to the transmission of knowledge, not for power, not for recognition, but because he believed that truth was worth preserving, worth passing on, worth teaching carefully. He saw the mind as something given by God and to be offered back to him. The texts on screen are good places to read further. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Next time we come to Helena, Protector of the Holy Places, on the 21st of May. Good night and God bless.